nice soup. One of my favorite soups. It's a fun soup I came up with years ago. Customers always loved it. I think I was walking around the kitchen, had too many onions laying around. But anyway, we call this a cream of 7 onions. So to get 7 onions, you just go, a lot of them are by color. We have green, white, red, yellow. We're also going to add some leeks to that in the onion family. And then we have our shallots over here, as well as our garlic. So it's going to be a pureed soup. It can be made either vegan, if you just make it with a vegetable stock, or most creamed vegetable soups. If you go to a restaurant and you're a vegan and you say, oh, they got broccoli cheddar, always ask, because I'll tell you 9 times out of 10 is they make them with poultry stock. That's how we were just trained. We make vegetable soups, cream of cauliflower, cream of anything that's vegetable, cream of carrot and ginger, something like that. They're always ask if you want vegan, you know, just to make sure that they're not using poultry stock. We will use poultry stock today because I think it tastes good. But again, vegan's very simple. You can pick up vegetable stocks as well. And then also the last thing is our Bouquet Garni, our parsley, bay leaf, and thyme. Today we're using dried thyme. Remember, a dried herb will have about 4 times the effect because it's dehydrated. We got a couple fresh bay leaves off the baylor tree from the backyard, and parsley. Again, fresh is always best. But this is a soup that we're going to puree. So everything's going to be blended together. So let's go ahead and get started on it. Because we're going to blend this soup together, we're not too concerned about the size. It should be fairly small, maybe, you know, large dice or to medium dice. They could be all about the same on the soup, but when you're going to puree, it really doesn't make a difference. You just want them to all kind of cook at the same time. So we're going to do them all the same way here. We're going to go ahead and just take the ends off of each of these. All right. And then we're just going to make a nice slight cut here. And you're just barely breaking the surface on this. All right. Nice little cut like so. And then we're just going to peel that. We get this, keep this onion out of our cutting board, our way here, so we can get rid of that into the garbage can. And then we just peel this off, and we want to get this leathery component, or skin rather, this leathery stuff that's on there, or maybe it's just colored, so it's maybe not quite as mature. So we want to just get rid of that because sometimes that can be a little chewy. Again, on this kind of soup, it doesn't make a really big difference simply because we are going to puree it up. Okay, so we're just going to follow the same thing, same method, cutting these down, peeling them off, getting those back up out of the way. The recipe will call for 2 white onions and 2 red onions, but these are large, so it calls for 2 medium onions. So if all you got is large, that's what you use. But again, I think that the larger an onion gets, the less flavorful it generally is going to be. So you want to get them when they're a good appropriate size, and you know, available of course all through the year. Again, we got this little bit of leathery part right here. We want to go ahead and peel that off as well, get down to the more tender layer inside of that. So nice and easy on that one. So we got our white, our red, and then our yellow. Obviously it's yellow on the outside, off color on the inside, I guess. But again, you know, when you think of 7 onions, and I always got this reaction, oh, 7 onions, that's going to be a strong soup. It's really not, because the shallots are very sweet. The red onions are generally going to be on the sweeter side. You got your leeks, so the balance of all of them really comes out very nice. So let's go ahead and got those prepped now. These leeks, and we need to just understand that, you know, they do grow standing up. So, you know, when it's raining and there's mud out in the fields, you can get mud down in here. So you can see that here. So you're going to want to make sure that you clean that out. All right. So these will be rinsed. I'm going to go ahead and dice them first. I'm going to get the tougher pieces off of here and get down to this tender stuff. And then I'm going to go ahead and dice them up and then rinse them. Just give them a quick rinse, because again, the way they grow, green onions can be the same way. Your lettuces, that way, especially romaine, they'll collect dirt when it rains out in the field. So we're going to go ahead and prep these guys, get these ready to go as well. We just want to use the tender bottoms. Okay, there's not much you can do with these. You can feed them to your pigs or your chickens. I don't know if our chickens would eat these. Probably not. They're not real onion fans. But again, if you were making a vegetable stock for this, you could throw them in there. That would be fine. You could drive a little bit of flavor out of them, but you certainly can't chew them. They're very leathery. All right. So we got those prepped and ready to go. Now we're just going to go and do the same thing with our shallots. Again, cut both ends. Do a cut along the outside and just peel. We don't want to throw away a lot of the meat on that onion, but we do want to get rid of, again, that leathery part. So there's our shallot. We're going to do the rest of those. All right, so looks like we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down, 2 to go. And again, our cut on this really doesn't matter. So I mentioned large dice and medium dice. It's at some point, when we get into our cutting video, you can pick those up. So you're kind of just got the general idea. Medium dice is a 1/2 inch squared. Now it's kind of hard to take something that's round and make it 1/2 inch squared. So it's a basic size. Small dice would be 1/4 inch. Then you go smaller than that, you get into minced and chopped. But small would be a 1/4 inch squared, medium would be a 1/2 inch squared, and then large would be 3/4 inch squared. All right, so those are the sizes that they taught us in our French apprenticeship. We're going to go ahead and just cut that little piece off of there. Anything just does. Here's the basic rule I use. If it doesn't look like something you would eat, then don't use it. It's a pretty simple rule. And then we'll go back to our second to last one here, our garlic. We're just going to press down on this. So if we get a shot of that, we get these out of the way so we get a better view perhaps. But we just press that down. Okay. And then we're pulling off, this is the whole bulb. And then we're just going to pull off some of these cloves. Again, we only need a tablespoon. We don't need a whole lot of garlic. That's probably going to give us a pretty good tablespoon right there. All right. So we got the rest of this garlic that we will just set aside. And then off into the garbage can. There we go. Okay, so when we prep this garlic, we use a little bit smaller knife. You can see the side where it's connected to the plant on this side. That's the side you want to cut. And just a simple cut across there. Okay. Down into the fruit or so. And then we, again, just that cut off to the side so we can peel it. Just like we did the onions. And there we go. All right. You just want to make sure there's nothing leathery on there. Leathery. Yeah. And because it's just going to be chewy. Again, we're going to puree it. Not going to make quite as big a difference. And also because we puree it, we're not too worried about the size of the cuts. If we were making, say, a chicken noodle soup where you had your onions, your carrots, your celery, and your chickens all in there, you want that to all be about the same size, all about a medium dice. So when you take a spoonful of chicken noodle soup, you get a little bit of chicken and a little bit of noodle. And if there are vegetables in there, you get a little bit of the vegetables. So you think about that. Think about the spoon size. Might seem a little strange, but if you're giving them a small spoon and you're giving them a soup with large chunks of stuff in it, then what's going to happen? They get a bite that's all potato. All they're going to taste is potato, and you want them to taste all the ingredients. All right, so let's get down to this last piece here. Again, we're just going to take the outside of this off. We'll break this one off. There we go. And again, we're looking for a tablespoon, so that's right about there. The last of this off, and then we'll go and just do just a slice on these. Again, there's no reason to flavor our cutting board. If I was to mince this up too fine, what would we have? We'd have a garlic flavored cutting board, which means there's less flavor in the garlic or in the soup. So we're just going to slice that. But anyway, so we've got our garlic here, and that's going to be what I'd probably call a heaping tablespoon. Heaping. All right. So now we're just going to simply cut these up. We're, again, not that big of a concern on how big they are. Remember, we always want to use that knuckle. Always use the knuckle. I can cut it from this side here. And actually cutting something that's a little bit elongated, like these here, you'll be able to run your finger along those a little bit better. But remember, these here, we're going to set aside after we cut them. We're going to go ahead and rinse them. All right. And again, they're all going to just completely break up. So we're not too concerned about that. But again, using that knuckle, then I got that knuckle right here. That's the knuckle that we use. Okay. So everything, I can sit here again all day long and cut without even paying attention to the cutting as much as. Remember, I'm a chef. I mean, I've mentioned this before, many times. But as a chef, I got to see what's going on in the kitchen. I can't be standing there the entire time, just head down, focused on on something like a simple procedure of cutting. So anyway, we'll get these out of the way, and then we'll go ahead and rinse these off. The rest of the onions, we're going to go ahead again, chop those up, and then we're going to go ahead and get some cooking going here, get this soup going. Again, this seems like it has a lot of ingredients in it. It does, simply because there's 7 onions. So, but again, we're not too worried about it. We're just going to chunk these up, variety of ways to do it, but I'm not too concerned about, again, the size. We're going to burr mix it. If you don't have a stick blender, you'll see me using that a lot. It's just one of the tools that's great for a kitchen. You need to have one. They're inexpensive to get. Just get one that has a big area on the bottom where that rotary blade is. So when you puree something, you stick that blender down in there, you're going to really be able to puree up kind of items that might be a little bit larger, especially in a soup like this here. In a kitchen, an industrial kitchen, the one I got is, you can troll with it. I mean, behind your boat if you want to go fishing. It's very long, okay, very, very long, and you stick the whole thing in there. And also just a quick comment on the volume and the size. When you're making soup, I'll say it's hard to make a small batch. Maybe it's a little more difficult. But also, why make a small batch? I can't think of too many soups that you're not able to just stick in the freezer. Make enough soup and throw it in a freezer-proof container or bag or baggie, and lay it out and let it freeze in the freezer. And then you've got soup all the time. So if I'm making a soup here, I would generally make 30 or 40 gallons, in a restaurant. But here, we might make a half gallon of soup. If it's only 2 people, give some away. It's made to share. You can always do that to the neighbors or whatever, or you can just, again, freeze it or bring it to work if you need to bring something for lunch and show people what you made. Okay, so, all right. And so the last thing we have here is our green onions after we get done with our red. And again, here we have all of our stuff. We are going to go ahead and rinse those leeks. Now, again, these are green onions. My wife is great at this. She always sticking them in here, and they just keep growing. We got them like, well, if you turn the camera around, which we don't need to, there's like 4 containers of them growing behind the sink. Just keep them in your kitchen. They don't even need a whole lot of sunlight. They just need to. Okay, and then we're going to cut these down. This is going to be one of those where we can get down a little bit further down on these ends here. Simply again, because the whole thing's going to be pureed. All right, so we're going to get that out of there. So now we have what we'd refer to as our mise en place, right? All of our ingredients together in one spot. We need our roux and our base, of course, which is over by the stove, which is where we're headed now. But again, this is our mise en place. Everything together before we get started. Let's head towards the stove. Okay, so now we're going to start cooking here. Always the fun part, throwing things together. We're going to start off with a little, what we normally do when I'm cooking, is I'll generally get the pot hot, and then I'm going to use a mixture of about half butter that's been melted down and half olive oil, just because the butter is going to allow that to be able to get a real nice flavor. Even got a little bit of brown butter in there. So we get this hot. Again, remember, we want it to be hot before we cook. Usually you can feel it sizzling, fill it without, and then fill it with. It should be fairly close, which it's getting there. Again, another way would be to flick a little bit of water in there, perhaps. If you have a little water and you want to flick, but you want to cook. So we flick a little water in there and we notice it's not really cooking and bubbling yet. So we're going to give it just another second to get going. We've also got our roux back here started, which is going to be equal parts, where we're going to use, again, 4 ounces of butter and then 4 ounces or half a cup of flour. So equal parts by volume or weight. Well, I go by volume on this one. Flour is a little bit lighter than butter. All right. So again, are we ready to cook? There we go. See, now we're ready to cook. Okay. All right, so we're just going to go straight in with all of our onions. We did rinse those leeks off, as we talked about, and we're just going to get these, start getting tender. Again, I get tender. There we go. I love this part of it. Okay, let's go and throw our Bouquet Garni in there, which would be our bay leaf, our thyme, and our parsley. Get a little flavor in there. If you're making a soup that you're not going to puree, then you can always take those bay leaves when you're done cooking and pick them out if you want. In this case, everything's going to be pureed. There might be a stem somewhere that you can pull out, but again, we're going to hold off on salt and pepper. We're always going to throw a little salt and pepper towards the end, just for kind of a final flavor on it and taste on it. Again, over here we have our chicken stock, which we're still going to add. Once our vegetables our onions get tender, we'll start off with the roux. We're going to use a white roux because it's going to be a white soup, white in color. So we wouldn't want to use a blonde roux as much or a brown roux. So a roux, again, is equal parts butter and flour. Melt the butter, add the flour. Once that's mixed, we have a white roux. We're on the stove in a small pan, a small pot like you see on the stove here. And as we cook it, it will start, that starch flavor will cook out, and you'll start to get an aroma of almost like hazelnuts, a little bit of a nutty aroma. And it starts to just turn color, just a little bit amber, or just, I mean, barely. Well, what you're doing is you're cooking out that starch. When you add it to the soup, you're not going to have to cook it out. You're going to have to cook it out someplace. That starch has got to be cooked out. If you've ever eaten something that didn't get enough cooking on it, that sticky, starchy, you want to get rid of that. So you do that by making sure the flour gets cooked in the roux or in the pot. Either way, doesn't matter. Dark roux, sometimes in the French cooking, we would just cook the flour in the oven until it browns. So that's great flour because it's not going to have any thickening properties or any starch. It will be thickened, but it won't have all those starch flavors. All right. So we're going to keep going with our soup here and let these cook down. And then we're going to go ahead and do our roux as well. Our butter, it's melted. And we're just simply going to add our flour. You can add it all in one big lump sum. You've seen that it was smoothed off the top. That's one a half cup of flour. If the recipe says, if I want more than that, I'll say a mounded cup or a mounded quarter cup. But if it doesn't say mounded, then it should be flattened. All right, then we're just going to mix this up. Again, it's going to look a little bit like kind of a light, sloppy Play-Doh maybe, consistency of cream of wheat. And we're just going to let this cook for a while back here. All right, and cook a little bit of that starch flavor out. We're going to give our onions a little bit of time to break down, and then we'll finish this up. As these are cooking down, if you're in a hurry and you want them to cook a little faster, there's quite a bit of moisture in here from the juice from the different onions that are in there. You can always put a lid on there. Putting a lid on is always going to increase the cooking cooking speed. Okay, to decrease the cooking time, because you put that lid on there, now all that heat is contained. And also that flavor, you know, that flavor that comes up as something's cooking, that it just becomes condensation on the bottom of the lid and then goes back down. Now, as far as who would be able to detect that flavor difference, I don't know, a professional taster maybe, but I doubt anybody else. So, but again, a lid always increases the speed of the cooking in case you want to decrease the cooking time. You're boiling something, making mashed potatoes, you want them to boil faster, put a lid on, but then keep an eye on it, make sure there's enough moisture in there. Okay, well now we're going to see this cooked down in its cooked down state, so it's able to be able to puree now. All these are pieces of onion, different pieces. Everything's nice and tender in there. Like I mentioned earlier, if you want to go ahead and get rid of the bay leaf, the flavor is going to be derived out of there. But everything's going to pretty much puree up, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. We're ready to go here. We're going to go ahead and deglaze this with some liquid. And the liquid we're going to use in this case is going to be chicken stock. I did mention earlier, always make sure the majority of vegetable-based soups, again, in this case, cream of onion, cream of broccoli, cream corn, whatever, we're going to use a poultry stock. So ask them if you're a vegetarian, make sure it doesn't, and they can use vegetable stock. Okay, so we have a quart. We're going to go ahead and add that. And then we also have cream that we're going to add to this. We're going to go ahead and add a pint. Okay, so that's 2 cups. And this is 1 quart, of course. The cream we use, 40%. I just wanted to show you something on measuring. When you're measuring something, you always want to get down and look at it being level. Okay, because from up here, it can be a 1/4 cup, depending on what you're doing, to a couple cups, because you're looking at an angle. So when you fill it up, make sure you get down there and you get a nice and even amount. We're going to go ahead and add that to our soup. And again, it's on high. We want to get the temperature up on this. So I'm going to take a minute to get up. It'll catch up a little bit. All right. And we're going to help that along by putting our lid back on. Again, we were still on high. And I want to just take a quick second to talk about the stick blender. And you've seen me use them before, but a stick blender, we called it a burr mixer when I was starting off. And again, they had big long ones that you could, use to troll your boat. I think I mentioned that. But anyway, if you're making 20, 30 gallons of soup. But for home, these are great. I always look for one that has it's real nice along the bottom. There's a lot of space in here for the vegetables that are cooked down to really be pureed up. There's a plastic one as well. And there's a variety of other adapters. Some of them have whisks and maybe paddles. I don't know what else they all have, but some of them have different attachments. Just attaches to the motor with just a single rotary blade, and you're off and running. So we're going to use that to take this soup and turn it into a liquid form, to completely puree it. And then we'll get that the right consistency we want. We do that in a variety of ways. If we want it thinner, we might add some more stock. If we want it thicker, we could add either the roux, which we're going to add some roux, or cornstarch. There's a lot of different thickeners that are out there. Rice starch. It just kind of depends on what you want to end up with, and the fact that you cook it long enough so it cooks that starch flavor out, that sticky starch flavor. Remember, you don't want that. You never want that. There's nothing you ever make that's going to be a benefit to. So here's the roux. And again, we mentioned this is a white roux. I cooked it on the stove. It was equal parts butter and flour. In this case, 4 ounces of each. And it just turned into kind of like a putty form. Maybe, obviously a little stiffer than that, but it really doesn't matter. It was almost very, very liquidy with a lot of viscosity though, but it was pourable, when I first made this, about 45 minutes ago. And then we've just been letting that sit while this goes. So that's why we are going to blend it. When you blend it, you not only mix in all of the aromatics and the main ingredients, in this case onions, as well as you'll make sure you don't have any clumps of flour, because this will completely blend it up. So that's one of the things you don't worry about. But just finishing up on roux, this still smells like it did when I put it in there. If you let this cook till it gets a little more amber color, it will start smelling a little nutty, almost like hazelnuts. That would be what we call a blonde roux. And then if we slowly stir this and let it get all the way to where it's a dark brown color, maybe similar to this, then you'd use that for a brown sauce. Brown roux, brown sauce. Blonde roux, blonde sauce. White roux, white sauce, cream sauce, or in this case, onion soup. All right. We've got this nice and hot, just starting to simmer, which is fine. We're going to let this cook out and let those flavors develop and let the thickening agent do its job. Once it comes up to a boil after we've thickened it, you turn it down. Always remember this very simple understanding. You thicken something, you turn it down. Thicken something, turn it down. If you don't turn it down, it's going to burn. So you thicken something, you turn it down anytime. Just got to remember that. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and take this roux, and we're going to go ahead and just add it right into our soup. Again, we've measured this out, so we know the amount, so we know it's the right amount. Sometimes you can go ahead and just simply cook it and then add more if it needs it later. Really, either way works. Okay, and now we're just going to burn mix this. Thicken that up, reduce the heat. I like to place it just off the bottom on an angle like this. If you go too flat, sometimes it just gets clogged up. This way here, you'll notice that it's pulling everything back in, pulling it back in, pulling it back in. Again, you want to do this until we don't see any more large particles, large pieces of onion or anything else. So that might be, I don't know, a minute and a half or so. You can also strain this. You can also strain it if you want, but it's a couple minutes with the mixer, making sure chunks are fine. I don't mind that as long as they're not chunks of flour. So we burn mix it. We've got all those chopped up. You see that we're simmering here. We're going to reduce the temperature a bit, and give it 20 minutes, and just it's ready to eat now, but it's still going to continue to develop. And then again, if you got a little bit left over, great in the freezer or anything along those lines. Just for down the road, you won't have to go through the process, just warm some up. All right. And I just want to talk a little bit about dishing up the soup. First off, you want it nice and hot. And this is really a big mistake that was like the first thing I think I was told when I started my apprenticeship back in the late 70s. That, hot food on hot plates, cold food on cold plates. I can't tell you how many times I've gone to a restaurant and gotten just kind of a dish like, either shrimp or grits or maybe a mac and cheese that, was more of a bound dish in sauce, but the bowl was ice cold. So by the time you get in, you eat it and you start getting through, you're lucky if you're lukewarm. So just make sure that you're, again, hot food in hot plates, cold food in cold plates. Make sure that your plateware, tableware are able to handle that. Of course, these little crocks, these things are beautiful. They are just right about 8 ounces to the very top. We're going to go about 7 ounces. And then one other thing I want to talk to you about quickly is the portion. When you're doing a multi-course meal, remember your stomach can only handle around 37 bites of food on average. So each course for 7 courses would have to be a little bit miniaturized. If it's 3 courses, they can be quite a bit larger. But when I talk about that, like, okay, your appetizer might just be a couple bites. And then, normal appetizers, 3 to 4 bites. But maybe it's more of a mousse-bouche, just or an hors d'oeuvre. Something would be 1 or 2 bites. And then you go into another course, which is soup, and maybe it's about 6 or 7 bites. And then you go into your salad, which again is maybe 7 or 8 bites or 6 or 7 bites. So you start adding those up. The idea when you serve an elevated meal is not to stuff people, but that they're comfortably full. I could love everything I've eaten, but I walk out holding my stomach, kind of think, oh wow, I'm uncomfortable when I shouldn't be. I should just be focused on enjoying the meal. So soup, you want to keep around 6 or 7 bites, which is about 6 or 7 ounces. So we would use something like this, nice and hot. They put this on an underliner. And, put nice and hot out of the kitchen, put the lid on there. When they open that up, they get that aroma. It's a wonderful sensation with the sense of smell that just kind of hits you, maybe a little bit of steam. So we want to, again, fill this up. When we go to dish up, we want to always scrape the ladle. Okay, that buys you a little time, so you're not going to drip it all over the place. Scrape the ladle, go right inside. Okay, and I'd probably go, this is a 4-ounce ladle, so 1.5 scoops. That would be my portion size, and there we go. This is 1 cup. This is standard cup for serving soup and salad. If you're going to get a cup, set that off to the side, and then remember, you always garnish. You always garnish with an ingredient that is included in the dish. So this has 7 onions, and so you could garnish with any of those. It would make sense. For example, a chive is an onion, but there's no chives in it, so I probably wouldn't use a chive. The purpose of a garnish is to explain some of what is in the dish. So you wouldn't just put big thing of rosemary next to your steak and mashed potatoes and cream spinach if there's no rosemary anywhere on the plate. So just kind of a thinking. On this particular one, we're just going to cut this on an extreme bias. The French would call this kind of an advanced émincé. Émincé is 45-degree angle, and then we just might, put it just a touch on there. Might want to sprinkle a little bit of paprika on it or something, but that's about all you need. Something simple. Green onions were included in the dish. It would make sense.